How do you plan a 25-day road trip? In this video, I'll take you through some tips I learned from doing just that in planning a 25-day road trip to New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado in the summer of 2022. Let's get right into it with tip number 1. Start with a list of must-see and must-do things. Make a list of places and things that you really want to see and do on the trip that are most important to you. Use ideas from previous trips, videos, friends, and if you don't know what's out there, and even if you do, Google things you've heard about, or even just towns and regions to get information. And by all means, watch YouTube videos. I love creating this list in Google Sheets so that I can access it from my tablet or phone as well as my computer. The farther out you start this, the better the list will be. On our trip out west, the big things were seeing the red rocks of Sedona, riding the Grand Canyon Railway, the jet boat trip from Laughlin to London Bridge, the Cirque du Soleil O Show in Las Vegas, eating at Hell's Kitchen and Monami Gabi, jeeping in the mountains around Ouray, and riding the Durango Silverton narrow gauge railway. Tip number 2. Decide how much time each must-see and must-do thing will take. Think about this in terms of both days and nights. If something will take all day, you're going to want to be there the night before and the night after. For example, riding the Grand Canyon Railway to the Grand Canyon, visiting the canyon, and returning to Williams took most of the day, so I knew we needed to be in Williams the night before and the night after. I added these numbers to 2 columns in my spreadsheet. Tip number 3, put the list in a logical travel order. Think of a giant loop here. Use a physical map or go online. Simply connect the dots that represent the places from the start to the farthest point away, and then return to complete a loop. Remember, since you have to get back, leave some of those points that don't connect well for the return trip. For our trip, the farthest point west from Texas was Las Vegas. Colorado was north, so it made sense to do Arizona on the trip out, and Colorado and northern New Mexico on the return trip. Our loop was not completed until we were almost back to San Antonio. Tip number 4, add interesting and necessary stops along the way. After you've worked out the order of the trip, you may discover that some segments are long while others are short. There are often interesting places along the way that can be added as a stopover to break up the trip, or that will be a good way to spend time if it can be worked into the plan. Look for scenic or interesting routes to get between key points, and add stops along the way if you would like. For example, on our western road trip, the first must-do stop was Sedona, Arizona. Even though we were willing to drive for a long time on the first day, it was much too far to drive from San Antonio, our departure point. After watching YouTube and doing some research, I discovered Silver City, New Mexico. It seemed like an interesting place. It was about right for our first day's drive and a relatively easy drive for day 2 on to Sedona, even if we spent most of the morning in Silver City. It was added to the itinerary and turned out to be a good choice that we enjoyed and might well add to a future itinerary. Tip number 5, divide the trip into related segments. Divide the trip into segments or chunks. This will make it easier to work on and even makes a mental separation that makes it feel like several separate trips. Instead of that depressed feeling that the trip is over, there is the positive vibe of knowing that the next part is starting. Our trip naturally divided into pieces that roughly fit states. The first section that I call the Arizona segment was 6 nights and included Silver City, which is actually in New Mexico, followed by Sedona, Arizona, Williams, Arizona, and the Grand Canyon, and Laughlin, which is actually in Nevada but just across the river from Arizona. Segment 2 was 7 nights in Las Vegas, Segment 3 was 7 nights in Colorado, and Segment 4 was New Mexico for the final 4 nights, including Red River and Ruidoso. Tip number 6, work on each segment separately for itineraries and reservations. Think of each segment as a separate trip when planning routes, creating itineraries, and making lodging and attraction reservations. You don't have to reserve everything, but do your research and be sure you know the places and things that will need to be reserved in advance to avoid disappointments. This will be especially true if you're using sites like Airbnb or Vrbo. I like to know where I'm going to be each night, but don't worry as much about what I'm going to do during the day to get there, unless buying tickets or making reservations are involved. All of this seems much less daunting if each segment is approached as a separate trip to be planned. You can work on them in any order and switch back and forth if you want to change of pace. On our trip, the level of planning was different for each segment. In the Arizona segment, it was important to reserve Sedona accommodations early, along with the Grand Canyon Hotel and train tickets. Laughlin and the jet boat could be done closer to departure, and the last reservation I made was the hotel in Silver City. For other segments, I made Las Vegas reservations many months in advance because I got a deal and knew I could change or cancel, and booked Cirque du Soleil shows as soon as tickets became available. I reserved a Jeep in Ouray when they opened for the season, bought tickets to the Durango Silverton Railroad several months in advance to get the car and seats I wanted, and then just started filling in the rest. The good news, almost everything can be done online. Tip number 7, create a budget, starting with the big things in each segment. Road trips with a lot of activities are not cheap. Start by planning the costs of the big items on your must-do and must-see list. Add in the cost of accommodations and meals. Don't forget about the expensive ones on your must-do list, souvenirs, and of course fuel costs. I add in about 20% for things like park entry fees, snacks along the way, coffee stops, parking, Uber and Lyft, amusement ride, and those little things we forget about. For us, the big item costs were for train tickets, Las Vegas shows, jet boat tickets, meals at a few expensive restaurants, Jeep rental, and a gambling budget for hotels with casinos. We drove over 4,200 miles, so gas was certainly a major budget item. I like doing my budget in a Google Sheet, which allows me to have it with me at all times on my devices. I keep up with it throughout the trip. Tip number 8, remove segments if they don't fit within budgets or time constraints. This is a quick tip. If you don't have the time or budget to do everything on your list, take out segments or parts of segments. See these things as parts or all of a future trip that you can begin planning when you get home. I originally planned for our road trip to go all the way to the West Coast, but soon realized that there was just way too much to do for the time or budget that I had allotted, and took out those parts of the trip. Hopefully, they will be a high priority on a future trip. Tip number 9, plan packing just like you would any other part of the trip. We put so much time and effort into planning a trip and then wait until the last minute to pack. Further, we throw in everything that we think we might want and end up overpacking and lugging around a lot of extra stuff. Use the segments of your trip to plan for packing. A great way to do this is pack in cubes in a larger suitcase that stays in the car. Each of us packed clothes for each segment of the trip and cubes that would fit in carry-on size luggage. We put the cubes for the first segment of the trip in a carry-on and packed the rest in a larger suitcase that would stay in the car. To make this work, you must decide what you actually need for each segment. In addition to the carry-on, each of us carried a backpack, the size that fits under an airplane seat, with our electronics, chargers, toiletries, paperwork, passports, and a change of clothing. At each stop, we carried in the backpack and carry-on, and sometimes just the backpack. Dirty clothes got put in cubes, and at the end of each segment, traded out for fresh cubes from the suitcases in the car. Valuables always went in with us, and we had minimal things to carry with us. Each of us had a suitcase, a carry-on, and a backpack for a 25-day road trip. By the way, extra shoes stay in the car. Tip number 10, take advantage of rewards points. Hotel chains and restaurant chains have rewards programs. Take advantage of them, and you may have not only discounted rates, but free nights for a future trip. To use them, sign up online and book through their websites to accumulate and track points. You will see when you get free stuff and can take advantage of it on future bookings. I tend to stick with a few to maximize rewards through their loyalty programs. I used 3 different hotel rewards programs on our trip. Hilton Honors, this works at Hampton, which I use a lot. Wyndham Rewards, which works at a number of less expensive chains often available in smaller towns, and Best Western Rewards. Each of these has its own website for booking and tracking points. I used these to find hotels throughout the trip planning process. In addition, I used Hotels.com, which has its own loyalty program, which will earn a free stay night after 10 nights booked. In addition to this, I always use players' cards when in Las Vegas, and a trip to Vegas the previous summer resulted in free hotel nights on this trip. Tip number 11, use credit cards with points or cash back. There are lots of credit card rewards cards out there. Some of these are branded, while others are just general rewards cards that give rewards points for spending that can be used in a number of ways, including cash back or credits applied to the bill. In general, find a couple you like and use them. On our summer 2022 road trip, I used a Chase Freedom Visa card and a Discover card. Discover was offering 5 times points on gasoline purchases during the time of our trip, while Chase was offering a multiplier on restaurants at the time, in addition to points for all spending. By using these cards strategically during our trip, I was able to earn several $100s in cash back that I applied to the bill. Combined with hotel and dining rewards programs, using the right credit cards on road trips can lead to substantial savings. Tip number 12, use removed segments and discoveries along the way to create the must-do and must-see lists for future trips. When I have to remove segments or parts of segments from a trip, it is made easier by the knowledge that this can be the start of another trip. In addition, when I see things while on a trip that I want to do but don't have the time or budget for, I add them to a list of future things to do on a trip. This makes a great starting place for planning the next or a future trip. As stated earlier, our Western road trip was originally intended to go all the way to the West Coast, but there just wasn't time. It's already part of planning for a future trip. For me, planning is one of the fun parts of a road trip. I love making lists of possible things to do, places to stay, and of course, places to eat. Hey, if you haven't done so, would you consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification button? This helps out the channel and makes sure that you always receive notifications when we add new content to the channel. You can find all these tips and more on our website as a handy trip planning free reference guide at findushere.com. Proper planning for a road trip can make the actual trip much less stressful, and the knowledge that you will know where you will be and when you will be there. This allows you to enjoy the travel, see the things along the way, be spontaneous within reason, and not spend your time worrying and stressing over what's coming next. Use these tips and enjoy your next road trip. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share. And if you're new to the channel, support us by subscribing to the channel and hit that notification button to be notified when we release a new video. Your subscription is always free and greatly appreciated. Check out our website at findushere.com for more video and other content. And be sure to join us on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Find Us Here Online. If you would like to become a channel supporter, we are on Patreon at patreon.com/findushere. Your support is greatly appreciated.